Flamingo Road is the story of a Baltimore police officer who finds herself in trouble in terms of her job and ends up going undercover and immersing herself in the world of racing. Before it's done, she winds up confronting the doping of racehorses, the illegal slaughter of horses, and high-stakes gambling amongst very wealthy. It is fast-paced and was a little tricky to find a passage of the book that wasn't kind of contingent on what had just happened, which is wonderful because it makes for a book that you can't put down. But wanted to give you a little flavor of this wonderful character. And Sasscer has written a series of mysteries that revolve around female protagonists. I fell in love with her work with Nikki Luttrell. This one is Fia McKee, and she has a very strong voice, as you'll see. She knows she's in trouble, and now she's gotten onto a phone call with her boss at the police department. She says, "I took my phone through the living room out onto the terrace and called Ladner. 'It's me,' I said when he answered. 'Fia, you need to come up to Baltimore and meet with Gravelin and this guy from the TRPB. Name's Gunford Jameson. It could be an out for you, a good one.' 'What? I don't want an out. I want to be a cop. What does the TRPB have to do with me?' Ladner coughed as if my outburst had made him choke on his cigar. 'Could you shut up a minute, I told you? Gravelin is gunning for you. You pissed him off with that flip remark you made, not to mention you ignored his direct command to stay out of the case. You're not helping yourself.' Beyond the barn, a ragged cloud drifted across the horizon and shut out the morning light. I could smell a dampness in the earth beyond the terrace. Ladner's voice had become so sharp and loud, I held the phone away from my ear and still heard the next words clearly. 'You know what the TRPB is, right?' I pulled the phone back, feeling like a grade school kid presented with a pop quiz. 'The Thoroughbred Racing Protective Bureau,' I said, trying not to grit my teeth. 'They work to keep racing clean so the public's confidence doesn't go down the drain any worse than it already has. What's that got to do with me?' Jameson called me yesterday. He's the TRPB VP. They want to hire you." "They wanted to hire me? Why? I didn't want to work for the racetrack." "Did I?" My trip to Pimlico's barns had raised painful memories of Dad's murder. I shook my head and started to say, "No way." But Dad had died at the track. Maybe I could find some sort of explanation, or at least closure for his death. Over Cody's barn, the cloud on the horizon drifted just enough to let the sun's rays hit the brass on the stable's cupola. "Fia, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here. What do they have in mind?" There was a pause while Ladner took a pull on his cigar. "Undercover work, but you got to come up here and see this guy. He's not hiring you without meeting you. But the main thing is, if you agree to work for them, I think Gravelin will close the investigation on you." "He wants me out that much?" "Listen, once things cool down, you can come back." "Yeah, and then I'll rise to police commissioner." Still, the Bureau was a watchdog for the integrity of American horse racing. Since I can be a bitch and have met a few racetrack lowlifes I wouldn't mind biting, the TRPB job might suit me. "Ladner," I said, "thanks for looking out for me. I'll come up there, if only for you. Let me know when you book a flight. I'll set up the meeting." I slid the phone in my pocket and stared at the pool's surface that glittered like wet diamonds. I'd been in the same rut for almost 5 years, a beat cop going nowhere. Maybe I should take the job. But this guy Jameson must have a real problem to be so urgently in need of a new undercover agent. What had happened to the last one? And why did he want me? So as I mentioned, Sasscer's work features strong female heroines that have their faults and find themselves back at the racetrack in some context to solve a mystery, generally with other professions to go alongside it. The vivid, accurate portrayals, personal descriptions of the track really immerse you in the world and draw on her own experiences as an amateur steeplechase jockey, an owner and breeder and rider for more than 30 years herself in Maryland. Her first novel was Full Mortality, and it was nominated for very prestigious awards, the Agatha Award and the McCavity Award as well. She originally received a BA from Franklin and Marshall College and currently lives in Aiken. And I will say, in addition to being a finalist for the Tony Ryan Award, as well as Felix, she has the distinction of having owned horses, racehorses herself, that have been very successful, most notably among them for Love and Honor, who campaigned around New York and won over $400,000. But this one I thought was the most interesting fact of all. She's a descendant of Sam Ogle, who was the governor in Maryland in the 1770s when Maryland was still a colony. And he's credited with bringing racing to North America and the colonies. He helped put on the very first race in the English style of thoroughbred racing at Annapolis in 1745. So the roots run deep for Sasscer.
Yay, I made it. After a bourbon, you kind of look at the steps and you think, I don't know, I guess I can get up there. So I just want to tell you that my career, if you want to call it that, started in the 5th grade, or maybe even before. I read everything that Walter Farley ever wrote. Those Black Stallion books, God, I loved them. And then when I was in the 5th grade, our teacher, whose name was Mrs. Kimmerling, and I'll never forget her, she had coffee breath. It's the things you remember, from your childhood are amazing. And she wanted us all to write something, a little bit, piece of fiction. And all the kids in the class were like, oh my God, are you kidding me? So I wrote this little fragment, and it was sort of like something out of a Walter Farley book. There was a boy, kind of like an Alex Ramsey, in a trailer with an old man, kind of like Henry. And they were going to the races, and they had a horse behind them in the trailer. And since this was maybe 50 years ago, I don't remember what happened, but something scary and odd happened. And I told that little bit, and then I stopped. And I was so surprised because these little kids in the class, they raised their hands. And I looked at them like, I said, what? And they said, what happens next? And I want to tell you that for an author, there is nothing sweeter. There are no more beautiful words than knowing that somebody wants to know what happens next. So from there, I graduated to Dick Francis, of course. And then I ended up raising racehorses in Maryland with my husband. I had always wanted to write, but I had a bunch of jobs, every single one of which I despised. I wanted to be at home. I wanted to be out galloping my horses and getting them ready for the steeplechase races. I did. But finally, I wrote my first book, and it was a disaster. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know what a story arc was. I didn't even know what point of view or any of it. So it actually went to a couple of big publishers, and they all made fun of it and wrote horrible letters. And then I got real depressed, and I just said, well, I can't write. And 5 years went by, and I didn't try to write anything. And then finally, I took a course at a little school in Bethesda, Maryland, and I took a course in mystery writing, which is what I wanted to write. And I wrote Full Mortality. And I just wrote it without any help from anybody. And, you couldn't knock me over with a feather when it was nominated for both of those 2 awards. Didn't win, but the nomination was incredible. But unfortunately, my Nikki Luttrell series, there's a 4-book series, came out with a tiny little press out of Maryland. There was just no support. There was no distribution. There was no publicity. So, of course, it never really went anywhere great. I have a following. I have readers that love the books, and they talk to me every day on Facebook. But finally, I was told by a mentor of mine who is a very good mystery writer, and she said, you've got to find a new agent. And so I did. I found a good agent, and she said, you got to write a new series. Nobody's going to touch the Nikki Luttrell series. They're not going to want some used goods from some small press out of Maryland. And she was right. They didn't. So I came up with Thea McKee. And the threads for that first story were things that I knew about, that I'd read about in The Blood Horse and that I'd read about in the newspaper. Certainly I'd read about Remington Park out in Oklahoma and the problems they've had with dimorphin. And the other thing I had read about and was absolutely fascinated with were these Cuban Americans and Haitians in the Sinai Basin that were slaughtering like young girls riding horses. They were killing them for the black market horse meat for the Cubans in Miami that love horse meat. So it was a terrible thing, and I thought, but oh my God, what a great thing for a murder mystery. So I pulled those threads together. I remember I called Craig Stevens, Dr. Craig Stevens. He's a pharmacologist at Oklahoma State University, and we had the most fun conversation. I told him I wanted to write about dimorphin, and I wanted to, could I possibly come up with a different South American tree frog than the one that was used to make dimorphin. And it turned out that he, Dr. Stevens, had been instrumental in helping to find a test for dimorphin so that they could get it off the market so that people would stop using it. So I asked him, I said, do you think maybe there could be another tree frog in South America and it would have a slightly different, makeup? And he said, yeah, that could happen. And I said, good. So we did that, but what was really fun about talking to him is we ended up talking about Breaking Bad. We both loved the show Breaking Bad. And he said to me, he said, you have got to write about a chemist. And I said, you're right, I'm putting a chemist in the book. And it became my favorite subplot in the book, a chemist that is sort of held hostage to make more dimorphin. And then I was lucky enough to reach and talk to Richard Cauto, who is the founder of Animal Recovery Mission in Florida. I think I'm losing my voice, but anyway, and he rescues horses, and he was very instrumental in finding some of these people that were slaughtering these horses. So I made him the first male character, sort of a hero in the book. And then I brought in another male character. But it was really fun, and that's what I love about being a writer. You have so much help from other people, and especially from law enforcement. The cops and the police detectives, they're wonderful because they want you to get it right. They're so sick of reading these books where, the fingerprints come back the next day. And no, they don't. It takes weeks sometimes, especially if you're nobody and it's a small case. You're not getting any help at all. So, I've had a good time, and I'm also having a very good time here tonight. I'm enjoying my bourbon, and I'm enjoying this crowd, and I'm very, very grateful to Shane and to everybody here that is involved in this. And the only other thing I wanted to say about this particular award, I was so pleased that it took in fiction books this year, because I think that good fiction about horse racing, as Dick Francis did, speaks to a different audience. I think that all these books about famous racehorses is speaking to the choir. And I think, racing needs more fans. And I think stories like this will get them in. And I just wanted to say thank you guys very much. Bye-bye.
I think it's your turn, Shane.
Thank you. That wasn't a bourbon trip. Sorry, you're right. It's 12 years, not 11 years. You threw me off that one. And the Me Too, I'm a bit suspicious on the Geoponte one on that one. This week, for the first time ever, I actually used Audible, which I'd never done before, which was fascinating. So when these books can get onto Audible, I'm going to flash through them all. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, as I said earlier on tonight, and all the staff in Castleton. I always forget that, but you know who you are, and thank you very much. Daryl and Tony for doing our new floor this year. It's disused taupe post and rail from outside, so it has a use other than burning it. Felix, you're right. I mean, Cheltenham today was actually cancelled, I believe, in relation to the heat there today. And by the way, it's not the O'Leary Book Award in relation to the bathroom. I just want to point that out right now. Heather, your story is fascinating about your family and the history and the theatre group that you do. And at some stage, I would love to come down and join you for that. And bourbon, well, where are you gone? Fascinating story. Great for all of that. And I've been watching actually recently, since I came to the States, I was kind of gone on an FBI craziness. And I've been watching Mind Hunters and the Unabomber. And it's all about profiling. So I'm all about fiction at the moment. Anyway, let me open up this envelope. So next year's judge, more importantly. And the winner of the 2017 Dr. Tony Ryan Book Award is Flamingo Road.
God, it's not easier the second time. I was sure that I had not won. I just was sure. So I'm going to cry. So therefore, that's all I'm going to say. And I'm going to get down now and get some more bourbon. Thank you.